Hey, it's John F. Gately. Welcome back. Who would have thought that Andrea Mitchell from MSNBC would be the next Putin operative to question the wisdom of the war in Ukraine, especially when it comes to Crimea? She almost sounds like Tucker Carlson. Listen.
President Zelensky vowed on Sunday to take back Crimea. How realistic is that?
How realistic is that? She's almost laughing at the concept.
The people there whom you spoke to view themselves as Russian.
That's right. From those people that we spoke to, it seemed unrealistic. And Andrew, I want to show you some new picture that we filmed yesterday at the port of Sevastopol. Now, this is the closest that any U.S. news crew has got to the Russian Black Sea fleet in many, many years. What you're seeing here are President Putin's ships at that port.
How did this slip by the censors, the pro-war censors at MSNBC? This is like Russian propaganda.
Why it's important is because Vladimir Putin will be determined to defend that port, to not have it taken away from him. He may well do pretty much anything to try to achieve that. And the reason why is because it is so strategically important to Russia.
Well, he is absolutely right about that. The strategic location right here on Google Maps, you can see it sticks out into the Black Sea. Once you do that, you can go through Istanbul to the Aegean and to the Mediterranean, and then you're either out to the rest of the world through Gibraltar or through Suez. It is a great port if you want to ship basically anything from the interior of Russia.
Here's the irony. Since he launched that invasion a year ago in Ukraine, the Ukrainians now will be determined not to have the Black Sea Fleet there, potentially threatening their coast for years to come. So it is a...
And all credit to the reporter here. I think his name is Keir Simmons. If I have that correct, please forgive me if I don't have it right. Basically, what he's saying is that the Ukrainians don't want this on their back door, but if we're going to get rid of it, or the Ukrainians are going to get rid of it, it could escalate into, basically, he doesn't want to say nuclear war, but that's what he's saying.
A very, very dangerous standoff that suggests that this could pan out for some time to come. It's hard to see how you reach a negotiation over that. And there in Sevastopol, Andrew, I've got to tell you,
so now he's trying to throw some shade on the concept of we'll be there for as long as it takes. Remember the montage of Yellen and Biden and all of them saying that just a short time ago, like less than a week. We'll be there for as long as it takes, whatever it takes, for as long as it takes. Yeah, how did this get through? Has anybody told Brian Kilmeade about this over at Fox? He must be very upset.
I mean, there was just military everywhere, absolutely everywhere. It is a military town. So again, when, for example, Victoria Nuland talks about, at the very least, we want Crimea to be demilitarized.
You remember Victoria Nuland. She's the one that's very happy that the pipeline got blown up. And she probably also had a lot to do with the coup that occurred in 2014.
I found myself standing there and wondering, how on earth does that happen?
And Keir, we keep hearing that Crimea is exactly what NATO and the U.S. fear Zelensky will try to go into with long-range weapons, maybe even with those F-16s if he ever were to get them, which I don't think he will, not in the near term.
Oh, don't you worry, you neocon warmongers, and Brad Paisley as well. McCaul, the Texas Congressman, East Texas, right? I think East Texas, just visited Kiev. I'm going to keep saying Kiev because all my life we said Kiev. But I'm seeing increased momentum towards getting the artillery and the planes in. In any event, we can start training the pilots now so they're ready. This is a widely spread out quote. I picked it up from Yahoo, but you can get it almost anywhere. He is the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
They're worried that that is a tripwire for Vladimir Putin. What is your take on that?
Let me translate for Andrea. Tripwire means nuclear weapons.
That's what they are worried about. I mean, we're standing in the place that has Jake Sullivan, for example, really worried, Andrew. And the reason why is because the idea that NATO weapons might kind of land on this place, potentially kill Russian civilians, and that would be an escalation. But by the way, this is an enormous challenge. General Mark Milley has made this clear. This is an enormous challenge for the Ukrainians. Here's why. Let's just give you a close-up look at that bridge behind me there. That's how we travelled into Crimea. It is open now. It is one of only two ways to get here. The other is a land bridge over to the northwest of here that is very, very much exposed. So with land forces, how do you take Crimea if you are the Ukrainians? That's why General Mark Milley says he thinks that it will be extremely difficult for the Ukrainians to push the Russians out of here. We have seen...
We already talked about the strategic importance, but looking at the map, as the reporter says, there's basically only two ways out of the Crimea. A small little way to the left and a little bit to the north. That's about it.
Substantial defences around this bridge behind me that is President Putin's pride and joy, Andrea, and that's not surprising. But as we saw in my piece, I mean, we also know that the Ukrainians have wanted, or at least they haven't admitted it, but it seems pretty likely that it was the Ukrainians, that they've wanted to target that bridge behind me there. Again, if you take down that bridge, how do the civilians leave? These are very, very difficult questions if we do get to the point where Crimea is an objective that the Ukrainians realistically can look at militarily.
So again, if anybody else would have said this or had this type of report, then clearly they're a Putin operative, right? They're a mole for Putin, whatever cliche you want to use. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, what's happening in the Ukraine is an awful thing. It's awful. It's war. Why would the United States risk to escalate that to potentially a nuclear war? Because once we give these weapons to Zelensky, I know that we provide technical assistance for targeting, but once we give them to Zelensky, we don't have complete control over them, and he's going to do what is in his micro interest, which does not appear to be in the interest of peace or in the interest of the United States. It appears to be drawing us closer into a war with not only Russia, but perhaps with China as well at the same time. Just as an analogy, if you remember, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy was also very concerned about what would happen in Berlin. Now, obviously, you don't want to be tremendously weak, like the Prime Minister of England when he came back and said, I have peace in our time. But on the other hand, we do not want to egg on a wider and potentially nuclear conflict. From the Home Office here in Plymouth, Massachusetts, behind enemy lines in more ways than one, have a great day. Bye-bye.